Якщо що, там навушник з перекладом є.
А для перекладу, так?
Ну, бачу, що є на зеленому.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. We start our operation today, and my name is Olga Atamanova. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 628 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about this year's sowing campaign. We will also discuss the exports and prospects of exports of Ukrainian grain. Joining us in this studio is Denis Marchuk, Deputy Chairman of the Ukrainian Agrarian Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Denis. Good afternoon. So first, let's discuss this year's sowing campaign. What are the preliminary results? Well, the sowing campaign is in its end. It was not so easy, just like previous year, but the agrarians are in the field. What's interesting, we decreased the number of sowing areas comparing to the period before the full-scale invasion. The decrease is almost twice. We all understand the factors: the occupied territories, mined territories, the areas along the front lines where the battle operations are still going on. But another factor is the absence of financial funds and weather conditions that resulted in certain delays because there was a drought that prevented agrarians to work in the field. So talking about the wheat, we've sown about 3.8 million hectares, which is twice as less as during the pre-war period. And another component, the absence of financial funds. You know, the Ukrainian agricultural manufacturers lost almost $100 million due to the inability to sell their products. It's the result of bad logistics, and the companies which were sowing grain crops and sunflower seeds, they decreased their sowing areas. But what's important, it will not reflect on the food security inside of the country, because what we have currently in the section of the winter crops, well, it will allow us to cover our internal needs. However, the export potential will be affected, and thus will be the ability of the state to receive the foreign currency proceeds. And under conditions like this, when we talk about losses like this, like 100 billion hryvnias, which is an amount of $2.5 billion, well, in this case, it would be very advantageous for us to find some financial support. And if the 579 program will be expanded for the agricultural manufacturers, it will allow them to better prepare for the spring sowing campaign. You know, now there are limits imposed in amount of $90 million. If those limits are increased without the growth of the interest and retaining it at the level of 5%, would allow the agricultural manufacturers to expand the sowing areas and expand their capacity. On top of that, if the parliament votes for the amendments to the current legislation on lending to the agrarians, it will help them a lot as well. So what is the harvest comparing to the previous year. For the time being, well, this year we've harvested more than previous year. Previous year it was within 66, 68 million of grain crops within the same period of the last year. This year this amount is reaching 72 million tons, but we know there are cases when the agrarians just leave the crops in the field due to inability to harvest them. However, we already reached the result of the year 16-17, which is a pretty good result for the war conditions. Well, now one of the biggest challenges for our agricultural manufacturers is the exports. So what are the prospects for the time being? What is the situation with the grain corridor in the Black Sea? How efficient is that? And what is the situation with our partners from EU? Well, export is the key thing for agrarians, because without it, it's very difficult to plan the work of the agrarian sector. And during this financial and marketing year, we are like 30% less on export compared to the previous year. This year, we've exported about 9 million tons of the grain crops this year, because last year the grain initiative was in effect, even regardless of all the problems created by the enemy. Now we unfortunately only have the capability to sell our export products through river ports of Danube and through roadways, through land roadways. Those routes still operate properly, and we were able to export 4.8 million tons in October only. But if we expand our capabilities of export in the Black Sea, it would help the agrarians a lot. Our military, they continue helping us with this, and Russia still continues their attacks on our port infrastructure and civilian infrastructure. And you know, the recent strike on the vessel entering a port of Odessa is an evidence of Russia's malign intent. So now our capabilities for export via Black Sea are limited, which reflected in the market. You know, when the humanitarian corridors started working, we started observing the growth of prices on the grain crops. It also increased the cost of freight for the ships entering the riverways of Danube. Yet another problem was created in the land roadways. It's a surprising situation when our partners started playing in favor of the enemy. Let's say it as it is. Since the 6th of November, 3 of the checkposts in the Polish border are blocked, and now there are thousands of cargo trucks in line for both exit and from and entrance to Ukraine. The loss is difficult to calculate for the time being, but it's 5 to 6 delay of delivery for all of the manufacturers currently. So if you add your vehicle to the electronic queue, well, I was talking to one of the representatives of the companies, and you know, their trucks were supposed to leave on the 9th of November, but then the date was postponed until the 15th, which resulted in compliance with the contracts they entered into. Well, currently we hope that the new government of Poland, the new democratic government of Poland, will ensure the fulfillment of all of the agreements that were previously entered into between Poland and Ukraine. Because previously we had to take permits to move through Poland. Now this requirement is lifted. For what I know, today on Monday there will be a meeting on the level of the Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine with his Polish peer. They will meet with the representatives of those forces which block the checkposts. If they agree on deblocking the checkposts, that will allow us to export more agricultural products. So we wait for this meeting to become or to result in something tangible. Yeah, we understand that the position of Ukraine is clear under conditions of the war. We cannot currently export our agricultural products through the Black Sea, and the corridors of the solidarity lanes, they will help us to build our export capacity. And how does it happen so that one of the countries of the EU neglects the laws of the EU itself and resorts to such blockades? Well, hopefully we will find some compromise. In your opinion, what could be this compromise? Well, I think that Ukraine should not allow any concessions within the agreements that were entered into previously. That was already stated by Mr. Kuberkov, the Minister of Infrastructure. And let's see what else will be happening there. Dear colleagues, do we have any questions on the floor? Vladislav Obuch, Ukrinform, how favorable for our exporters are the conditions in the global market? We know that in the corn market, in the global corn market that we hope so much on, the prices are on 3 years minimum. What's going on in other sectors and how it will reflect the harvest of corn? Are those areas that were not harvested are going to increase? Thank you very much. Well, hopefully they will increase, but I think that those who do not harvest now, they hope that they may lose less in spring, and it means they will harvest more corn in spring. Talking about the conditions in the global market, it's the year 2 of the war in Ukraine, and the prices are 40% below the global market. Well, it does affect our market, but not on a global level. Talking about Ukraine, and currently we see there is some interest from the Asian markets in Ukrainian grain, including in the sector of corn, which creates additional demand that allows us to add a little bit more in price. And if situation continues like this, our exporters will be able to sell their products. But comparing to the year 22, the sowing areas were decreased, but thanks to the good weather conditions, the amount of harvest was increased. And currently it's difficult to forecast what will be the amount of the sowing areas for the next season. It will depend on the funding of the agrarians and the price on the global market. We'll see whether they will prefer to sow more sunflower seeds or soy or corn, for example. Well, we've discussed the prices in the global market, but getting back to the internal market, do we expect the price for any crops to grow? So talking about the food basket, well, look, the seasonal factors started playing a significant role here. Even during the pre-war period and winter period, the product basket price was growing regularly. The price of dairy products, meat, vegetables and eggs is traditionally growing on a seasonal basis. And since the end of August, the prices for dairy products and meat has grown, which was the result of growth of prices for POL and logistics. Also, the agrarians increased the cattle farmers increased the number of cattle in their households, in their companies, and price of the dairy products, of the milk itself, has grown a little bit. It can continue until the middle of December before the processing companies have any obligations under the contracts in the internal market and export market. I assume that further on the price is about to fall a little bit. Talking about the eggs, the price will continue on the same level until probably May, until there will be new offers from the household. The poultry companies were destroyed, a lot of them, and damaged as a result of battle operations, which resulted in the growth of price for eggs. And talking about the crops, there is a positive dynamics for the Ukrainians, not for the agrarians, because they started working in loss already. Now the prices are below 30 hryvnias per kilogram, which is twice as less as during the same period of previous years. So seasonal factor plays a significant role for this group of products that I've mentioned. I think we will observe the growth of price for the same group of products probably up to 50% until the middle of winter. Yet another thing I want to mention, that our agrarians are currently facing a very big challenge. There will be the second stage of the agricultural lands sale reform, and Ukrainian farmers say that they run out of funds. I'm not even talking about the small and medium class agrarians that work under normal conditions, but if we talk about occupied and deoccupied territories, for them this option of funding or lending for buying more agricultural lands, this option for them is non-existent. This is why we've registered a petition on the website of the President of Ukraine. Currently the limit for sale is 100 hectares, so our petition is to decrease the limit to enable those agrarians who work in the freshly deoccupied territories, so that they could buy more agricultural lands. And we would like to urge everybody who's listening to this press conference, we urge the parliament to listen to the agrarians and not to increase the limit 100 times. Well, let's then touch upon another topic, the topic of demining. How are we doing there? Are we able to demine the deoccupied territories? How quickly does it happen, and do the farmers cope with this problem? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't happen very quickly. There are multiple cases of blowing up of the agricultural machinery and the farmers themselves. You know, last week just a tractor exploded in the field and it resulted in death of a tractor operator. Unfortunately, yes, some territories are demined. There are 470,000 hectares planned to be demined this year, and the amount of lands handed over to the farmers is about 200,000 hectares. But if we could engage more deminer groups, if we had more funds to procurement of proper demining machinery, it would facilitate our work a lot. We understand our farmers work a lot with the external foreign partners to raise funds for demining, so I think that all those processes will be accompanied by probably loss of human resources, loss of human lives that will result in probably loss of enthusiasm on their end. Thank you very much for joining our broadcast, dear colleagues. I'm reminding you, joining us in this studio was Denis Marchuk, the Deputy Chairman of Ukrainian Agrarian Council, and our next briefing will be at 14 o'clock. Joining us will be a representative of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, who will tell us how to prevent emergencies during the heating season. We would like to thank our security and defense forces for opportunity to have events like this. Glory to Ukraine.